Carla Christopher, and I'm the assistant to the bishop in charge of Justice Ministries for Lower Susquehanna Synod here in central Pennsylvania, part of the Evangelical Lutheran Church of America, or the ELCA. And in this Train in 10 video, 10 minutes or less, your questions about Justice Ministries answered, I'm answering the question, what is Juneteenth, and how can I celebrate it in a faithful way? Well, Juneteenth has many names. It's also known as Freedom Day, Black Independence Day, or Jubilee Day. And Juneteenth is the day that slavery finally ended as a legal and enforced practice in the United States of America. Abraham Lincoln, the president at the time, signed the Emancipation Proclamation ending legal enslavement of Black people on January 1st, 1863. But slavery was still practiced and legally enforced until 1865 in Louisiana and Texas, because not only was the news slower to get there, but those invested in the transatlantic slave trade and its aftermath were just not quite ready to tell individuals that they were free. When Union soldiers finally arrived in Galveston, Texas on June 19th in 1865, the enslaved people were notified of their freedom. Celebration spontaneously broke out in African descent traditions across plantations, and the news quickly spread by runners and word of mouth. To this day, it has been a celebration held annually and remembered each June in African descent communities, but it became a holiday on June 17th in 2021 when President Joe Biden signed the Juneteenth National Independence Day Act. Now, Juneteenth is a national holiday that can be celebrated by congregations, by communities of every race, creed, color, and reason to gather. So what are some of the traditions behind Juneteenth? Well, at the time that Juneteenth was first celebrated, there were many traditions that were part of the African descent community. There was singing, prayer and praise, gatherings of family for cookouts, barbecues, and the sharing of a communal meal or food. There was also storytelling, a recounting of history, overcoming, stories from the Exodus, which was a story of profound inspiration to African descent individuals, all the way up to different enslaved people uprisings and acts of resistance. And as time went on, it became a time to recount the stories of other freedom fighters in the Black liberation movement. People like Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Fannie Lou Hamer, Audre Lorde, and more. That storytelling, that sharing, the praise and prayer services, foods, the giving of gifts, and dancing was all part of the joy that comes from having freedom for the life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness guaranteed by the Emancipation Proclamation. And so, skits acting out the reading of the Emancipation Proclamation, or simply a dramatic reading of that text, has also been a long-standing historical part of these celebrations. So how can a congregation, whether it does or does not have people of African descent in it, faithfully celebrate Juneteenth without practicing cultural appropriation? Well, the first is by honoring that great Juneteenth tradition of education through storytelling, through the sharing of wonderful videos and TED Talks that are available and done by African descent people or historical experts. We can teach individuals about Juneteenth and the rich history of celebration and overcoming and community. That education is very much part of Juneteenth tradition, and it's also a faithful thing. Storytelling around history with transparency, accountability, and when needed, confession. We can also gather in shared meals that we make open to others in the community. One of the traditions of Juneteenth is to share foods that are red, such as red velvet cake, red juice, watermelon, or foods like meat with a red sauce. That has a somber symbolism. Those red foods are honoring the blood of those who died in the struggle for emancipation, those who fought for freedom, and those who died on the Mid-Atlantic Passage being transported from Africa to America. A way to honor those ancestors, to remember their bloodshed, is incorporating the color red, a color that represents spirit, resistance, and the holy advocate within the church. Also, the practice of communal prayer, praying for continued progress in terms of freedom, justice, ministry, evangelism, and outreach, that the word not be kept from anyone who seeks it. So many enslaved people were prevented from freedom of worship, freedom of gathering, and so making donations or offering our space to support historically Black congregations is another wonderfully faithful way to uplift Juneteenth in our communities. We can also partner with community events, both secular and sacred, that are uplifting Juneteenth and taking it to a wider audience, participating particularly if those events are organized or highlighting and featuring primarily people of African descent who may have ancestors that were enslaved African Americans. That's a wonderful way to faithfully uplift Juneteenth in our community. We can also, of course, pray for each other, worship, sing songs and spirituals, and always educate around who wrote those songs and those readings. What meaning did they have? Was it a spiritual that was actually a secret code and part of a freedom fight? Many of us do not know that Lift Every Voice and Sing, a well-beloved hymn, is actually known as the Black National Anthem and was sung at many Juneteenth celebrations from its earliest days. To sing Lift Every Voice and Sing is a very faithful way to honor those early church services of thanksgiving and blessing that marked those earliest days. Most importantly, as we celebrate Juneteenth, we can commit to activism and advocacy for all those still under active oppression. Juneteenth was a celebration because a type of oppression was ending. But of course we know that systemic racism and the oppression of people because of culture, as well as gender and sexual orientation, ability, and others, still continues in our society. So perhaps the most faithful way that we can honor the spirit of the ancestors on Juneteenth is to practice and commit to advocacy, writing opinion editorials, letters, circulating petitions, being part of Get Out the Vote efforts, and encouraging people to register to vote, educate themselves about candidates, and participate in our local governmental systems. We can make a difference, and Juneteenth is a wonderful and faithful reason to remind us to do so.